And good afternoon, everybody, to the Dutch Mentor, our weekly Lunch and Learn series, Friday, 12 o'clock, same place, same time. Every week, a different topic. Today, we are joined by a nice gentleman, Dan Kowalski, who I met several weeks ago, and we had a very interesting conversation about deliberate thinking. And I thought it was so interesting that I was being very deliberate about it and said, listen, why don't you come and share your knowledge and experiences at our platform on a Friday at our Lunch and Learn. So Dan, thank you for joining us today. I will turn the reins over to you in a second and look forward to a presentation. Just for housekeeping items, I will present this both on my YouTube channel as well as our Thinkific platform for our students to look back. If you have any questions about any of the topics we discussed today, by all means, email me at thedutchmentor@gmail.com. And we will follow up, and then we'll give out this email at a later time at the back end when we're done with the Q&A. Again, then, thank you for joining and spending some time with our classmates and here at the Dutch Mentor. And I'll turn it over to you. It's all yours.
Thank you, Walter. Hi, everyone. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you. So I am going to talk to you about deliberate thinking, which is a way to solve any problem you may face in business and get way better results. And before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about how we currently and typically solve problems. And in general, we often are not thinking when we're solving problems. We are pattern matching using solutions to prior problems. And what that means is we see a lock and we find the key that unlocks it, the solution. And we do this because the brain needs a lot of energy to think, and it's much better if it can just recall something it has as a past pattern. So the general pattern is when I see this set of conditions, then I use this solution. So a classic example, when you're driving in your car, if you see the brake lights go on in the car in front of you, the research says that you're hitting the brakes before you're even aware that you're hitting the brakes. You may say, well, that's great for driving a car, but what about in business? Happens a lot. Invoice comes in, invoice matches the purchase order, you pay the invoice. If you're using a computer, it crashes, blue screen of death, Control-Alt-Delete. These are, I see these conditions, I use this solution. It's pattern matching. And what happens is that we're like the superintendent at an apartment building, and we just collect lots and lots of keys. Went too fast. And we solve problems that way. And that works fantastically. And what happens, though, when we don't have a prior solution that matches the current problem? So we have the key, a set of keys, and none of them are red that will work on that lock. But we love solving problems as human beings. So we're going to find the solution eventually. It may take us some time, and it feels great. It's, we get a release of endorphins and we're ready to go. And this works perfectly until we have a situation where we got keys, but it's a combination lock. We do not have clear information on the problem, and we have no known prior solution. Now we're kind of stuck, because all we had were a set of keys. But we have another way to get to this, and that's deliberate thinking. It moves us past convention and allows us to implement more effective solutions. And this work was originally identified by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel laureate in behavioral economics. And his best-selling book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, outlines these two systems. System one is that automatic, that's that pattern matching that we need for survival. And system two is deliberate. And he uses speed terminology, fast and slow, but what I want you thinking about is style of thinking. The style for fast is pattern matching. The style for slow is asking better questions to understand the problem fully and identify what solution will work most effectively. Now, this may all seem extremely academic, and it's more than that. I'm going to give you an example of how I've used this with a client, and they were starting up a food factory in India. And they had started up factories before, so it wasn't a startup in the classic sense of an IPO or something like that. And when a factory is started up, the equipment comes in and not all of it is ready at the same time. And what you do is when one piece is ready, you test it. And you really wouldn't want everything coming up all at once because that would be quite complicated and difficult. So when one piece starts up or is ready to be started up, you test it out. In this particular case, the second to the last piece of equipment, that is the piece of equipment that made the finished product, was ready. And that last piece would be putting it into packaging. So they needed a way to test that piece of equipment. Now, I'm going to oversimplify what startup looks like, but generally, you get the input material that you need. You then put it into the equipment that you're testing, and then you evaluate it, pass or fail. So that's pretty simplistic, and there's many more steps. So in this particular case, they needed all the input material to make the finished product, and none of that was available. So I was facilitating a team meeting, people from all around the world that were working on this project team. We were at doing the work in the United States. So one guy says, I know exactly what we need to do. I've got it. And he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to rent time at the supplier that makes the equipment at their pilot plant. We'll buy all the raw materials. We'll convert it, get that ready. We're going to put them in specialized containers, air freight it to India. We'll pay tariff, and it will work. It's fantastic. We can totally do that. And then someone said, well, how long is it going to take and what's it going to cost? He says, it's easy. It's $800,000 and it'll take 6 weeks. And I said, well, okay, we have a solution, because he had pattern matched. I asked the question, well, can we really, what do we really need here? And when you're starting up a food factory and running a food factory, the number one priority, like it is in the healthcare system, is you don't want any kind of contamination. So it has to be food grade that you're putting into it. So that was number one requirement. After that, they didn't care whether it tasted good, smelled good, looked good, because we weren't going to try to sell it or eat it. All we wanted to know, does the equipment work? So I asked the question, is there a material available in India that might be the same as the input materials? So that caused them to break out of their usual thinking. And they said, we need to make some phone calls. We're going to try some things. And because of the time difference from the US to India, they could send a message. They were asleep, but the next morning we would have an answer. So we come into the meeting, and remember, it was 800,000 in 6 weeks. Someone says, we found a material that's going to work. I said, that's great. And they said, it's not going to cost us that much or take that long. $50,000 in 1 week. Amazing. And then they said, here's the crazy thing. And this is true. I'm not making this up. The company made it. They had another factory in India that was making food that they hadn't thought about to use as the raw material, because what that factory made was something sweet, and this particular product was a savory product, but it had the same physical properties and was food safe. So save $750,000 and 5 weeks of time. That's what deliberate thinking will do when you break out of your usual thinking. You're going to get better solutions almost every time. So then what's it going to take for you to be a more deliberate thinker? Well, first, you have to understand the limitations of your usual thinking. Now, I am not against that fast thinking. It works when you have prior situations and prior solutions. If you don't, it's not going to work so well. So you must have sort of that lock and key situation. If you don't have the lock and key situation, it isn't going to work, no matter how many keys that you have. So the limitations are, if you've got the combination lock, you haven't seen it before, you don't have the key, your set of keys, not the answer. So that's the big limitation. When you have something for which there's no prior solution, you can't use your usual thinking. Now, your second step is that what you want to do is identify when to use deliberate thinking. So the combination lock, the best example of that would be if a competitor comes into your marketplace, takes your business, you've got to figure out what you're going to do about that. And you don't have a prior solution. There's a second type, that particular type of problem, the combination lock, is considered complicated because you know the conditions, you see the competitor, you just don't know what your solution is. There's a second type of problem that you may find that usual thinking won't work on, and that's a problem that you have potential solutions, but you don't know the problem exactly. And this might be a situation of revenue being down, for example, and you've got ideas, but you've got to understand, is it one customer, all customers, one area, one service? You need more information before you figure out what your solution should be. And that kind of problem is called complex because there's some complexity around the problem area. The solution may be available from prior problems once you clear away what the problem looks like. The third type of problem is safe. It's got a combination, but now it's a number pad and it's no longer just one little loop you have to get open. You've got to get the front of it open and get inside. A problem like this, we've been dealing with it for the last 2+ years, COVID. It's got lots and lots of angles and issues. And so it becomes very, very complicated, very, very complex. And the terminology used for this is a wicked problem. And these also will require deliberate thinking. So once you've identified that you can't use your usual thinking, you know that you need to use deliberate thinking, your third step is to use the right deliberate thinking approach. Now, with deliberate thinking, when it's a complicated problem like the combination lock, we're losing market share to a new competitor, what you have to do as a deliberate thinker, two things. First, you've got to find some solution ideas. And second, figure out a way to evaluate them. So that's the tool and technique of deliberate thinking in that particular kind of problem. When we have the problem of the padlock that's multicolored, what we have to do is understand what that problem is. So saying revenue is down isn't clear enough. We have to say what revenue, what customers, and then what we can do is go through and identify what key is really going to fit into that particular problem once I fully understand it. And that's the key, pun intended, of dealing with a problem that you have possible solutions for but don't know. Now with the safe, what we're looking at, the wicked problem, COVID is a classic example of that, hybrid work and developing any kind of new business. In this particular case, what we have to do is we have to clarify the problem, understand what part of COVID are we dealing with, what part of a new business, and then we also have to create new solution approaches. So that gives us the right thinking approaches with deliberate thinking for us to use. So generally speaking, we like to create models. So here's a general model for thinking. We have the problem information and we have the solution information. The problem information can be very clear or it can be unclear. The solution information, we can have proven solutions, we've solved it in the past, or it can range up to unproven or unknown solutions. Now, when we see something like this, our tendency is that, I've got ahead of myself. So the clear problem and proven solution, that is where you use your lock and key. You can do your pattern matching, no problem at all. When we have clear problem information and unproven or unknown solution, that is the combination lock. So we're going to have to identify new solutions and evaluate them. The unclear problem, like revenue being down, but there are different ways to address a revenue situation. Once I understand it, that's where that sits. And the safe, the wicked problem, is up here. It's unclear on the problem information and unproven or unknown solution information. Now, when we see a landscape like this, we have a tendency that we want to put some lines in. But you can already see that the combination lock is crossing over two of the boundaries, and the same for the lock and key, and the safe as well. So the boundaries are not a really good way of describing this. In general, what we really have is a lot more ambiguity and uncertainty, and that's more the real world. And deliberate thinking is made for this because what we have is the ability to address that cloud. So if we're in the upper left, we've got the ability to create new solution ideas and evaluate them to see which one is going to work best. So we have clear problem information and unproven or unknown solution information. We got a way to deal with that. Unclear problem information, but potentially proven solutions. We're going to clarify the problem by finding the matching key, the right solution that fits. And for the safe, the wicked problem, we're going to clarify the problem and create new solution approaches to address that. So what that will do as we are using deliberate thinking is we can start to reduce the gray. You're still going to have a level of ambiguity and uncertainty. If I had the ability to eliminate all of that, I'd have the magic key, and I don't have that. But I do have a way to help things be a lot better, because you're going to be asking questions so you can see into that cloud and understand what you're driving into and getting toward. As you use deliberate thinking, what you're going to find is meeting time is going to go down, because you're going to get faster resolutions. You're not wasting time discussing the same old, same old. You're going to have a clear pathway. You're going to see better outcomes. Your results are going to go way up. Think about that food startup. They were going to spend $800,000, take 6 weeks, 1 or 2 questions and a few phone calls and emails, and it's down to $50,000 and 1 week. That's a much better outcome. Less rework. I don't mind working hard. I hate reworking hard. When you do deliberate thinking, you're going to have less waste. It's really important. And then in the long run, you'll be able to solve any problem with deliberate thinking, no matter how ambiguous or uncertain it may be for you. So what I'd like to do now is, I know we don't have that many people that are live, but I'm going to pose some questions, and we can either discuss them now or you can discuss them in a future time, and I'll be happy to talk with you about your answer. So if you look at your world of work, in your experience, even though I said that the boundaries are, I made it kind of very gray and big, where do your problems fall? Are you in that lock and key? We've got pattern matching. It's all good. Are you in the combination lock setting with clear problem information, but unproven or unknown solution information? Or are you down in the lower right with unclear problem information, but possibly some proven solutions? Or are you operating up in that wicked problem area of quadrant 4, where you don't really understand the problem completely, and you certainly don't have solutions because you've never seen it before? So I want people thinking about that, because I think that helps you understand what tool should I be using. And by the way, even though I've listed this as a question, there probably isn't one quadrant that you can point to, but it's probably all 4. So another question. Yep. Do you want to add anything on that, Walter?
No, I think that in healthcare, we work in all 4 quadrants. It really depends on who presents the problem. I think when a patient presents a problem, you often work in the unclear problem information. Mm-hmm. But once you have clarified that, there are often proven solutions that you can utilize. When things come out of left field, and that could be a combination of factors, but often driven environmentally, like COVID, you're working in quadrant number 4, where you on the fly have to recreate a solution to a very complex problem, like working remotely, which is a very odd behavior for in healthcare. But we had to redesign and reconfigure, so there was no lock and key readily available. Maybe on a micro level, but certainly not on a skilled level, right? So interesting.
Yeah. And one of the things, I'm not going to, there's certainly a lot more to each of these thinking processes, but when you're in that upper right, the wicked problem, COVID, things like that, almost always the kind of solution that you will do will be experimental and iterative. So you'll try something, see how well it works. If it doesn't work well, then you try something else. And you have to be prepared for the sort of test and learn aspect when you're in the upper right quadrant. All right, so another question is, how often do your business problems land on the boundaries? And I've got three answers: rarely, often, or always. And again, no correct answer here. There are certain business situations where their answer can be rarely. And then there are other businesses where their answer will be daily, always. So again, it just gives you some thinking about which ones am I using the most often and why. And I think I have just one more question that is focused, which is, what's worse? A quadrant 1 problem masquerading as a quadrant 4 problem, or a quadrant 4 problem masquerading as a quadrant 1 problem? So the quadrant 1 problem masquerading as a quadrant 4 is one where you actually have a proven solution and you know more about the problem, but everyone's acting like it's unclear on the problem information and no idea what the solution is. So you have a key and you're saying, I don't want to use it, basically. And so what I would advocate is you want to make sure you're not doing that one. Quadrant 4 problems masquerading as quadrant 1 is you think you have a key and you keep trying it and it's not opening the safe. Put a different way, there's an old, it's attributed to the Chinese, who knows, give a man a hammer and lots of things look like nails. That's what's happening in that particular case. So you do want to sort of check yourself around the approach you're using to say, wait, do we really have this information or not? And is the solution right or not? So that is everything in the formal side of the discussion. And oh, sorry, I have one more question. I apologize, I wasn't paying attention. In your opinion, which is harder to solve? Quadrant 2, quadrant 3, or they're both equally hard to solve? And that just gives you an idea. We can become good in certain styles of deliberate thinking, but that doesn't mean we should just stay good in only one. Now I'm at the last slide where I say any questions that you have. And I know that most of you are watching this after the fact. I'd be happy to take your questions. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And that's it. The best way to do it is Solution Instigator, because Dan Kowalski, there's a lot of us. It's Kowalski is the Smith of Polish names. It actually means Smith. So Solution Instigator will get to me. And I thank you all for your time. And think deliberately as much as possible, or at least less automatically.
Yeah, then as we get to the bottom of the hour, really good, presentation. I think that it fits perfectly into where we are with the Leadership Academy around problem solving. Again, it is we too easily find the first key to the lock and not, ask the right questions as follow-ups. So it's really important that we don't, I always use the iceberg analogy, is that, where we want to go is the top of the iceberg, where we can see, but there is so much underneath the surface that really that needs to be explored, right? So we need to get to root causes and not, fix things at the surface. So I think this talk about deliberate thinking really helps set the stage of taking that extra minute to challenge the conventional way of thinking, to make sure that you are going to find the right solutions to the right problems that will have sustainable outcomes. And yes, 100% correct. It is, especially when you have a complex problem, you don't want to, you don't want to roll this out system-wide before you have carefully measured the implications of the changes you're going to be driving. So it needs to be done incrementally. Candice, you have any questions before I stop the recording?
I don't.
Okay. Well, thank you, Candice, for being there. Thank you for all the other students for listening to it at a later time. Again, you can reach out to me at thedutchmentor@gmail.com, or we can discuss it next week in class. Dan, thank you very much for a really great presentation and a stimulating, conversation. I look forward to staying connected and maybe work together on a project in the future.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much, and good luck to everyone to become better problem solvers and better thinkers.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.